Um, but really, I'm Andrew Cochrane. I'm one of the member educators at CSC. Our role here is to travel around the country and jump in on webinars and really give people the skills to start thinking about their retirement and looking at their superannuation and all those different facets. My background, I originally come out of defence and then was a financial planner for quite a time, an investment manager. So that's my background before I've stepped across into sort of running these kinds of sessions on how to plan for retirement. And I'll take you through a lot of the things that we used to think about as financial planners as well, when we're sitting down with clients and thinking about the best plan for them. It may not always be the most technically perfect plan, but the plan you can follow is much more important than the one that you'll find easy to get along with. So we'll get stuck into it. I'll jump across into my presentation now and let's begin. I'll just start with the acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country throughout Australia and their continued connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Some quick admin before we dive into it. Now, the topics we cover today are very much general in nature. So they are generally appropriate for most people, but may not be appropriate for you. And you need to make a decision on whether or not it is appropriate for you. I'll explain some of the strategies, how they work, different options that you have with those strategies. But really, at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what's best for you. And if you need some help with that, we do have financial planners and super specialists, and I'll call them out at the end of the session as well if you want a bit extra hand there and some of your options around that. So when planning for retirement, there's some pretty common questions that I get asked. You know, how much do I need it in retirement? It's normally the first one. And then you start to look at questions like, when should I retire? Have you thought about how long you'll be retired? What will your retirement look like? What will change in your day-to-day or your overall year? What are you thinking around that? And will that change over time? You're 60 when you retire, and then what happens after, 10, 20 plus years? Will your retirement look the same at the start compared to near the end? There's no easy sort of one size fits all to these questions. Everyone's different, and that's a really good thing. And some of these questions are really difficult to answer as well. Everyone's slightly different or have different life events that happen for them as well. So look, today's session, I just want to help you achieve three main things. So help you try and work out your target retirement income, how much income you need, and what age you're looking at retiring. Then plan for that entirety. So the different things you need to think about throughout retirement, not just at the start and what happens there. And then I'll give you some steps to take after today in your planning journey, and talk a bit more about how to maximize and what your planning options are there to get it a bit more into the nitty-gritty. All right, so let's begin with today. So I guess a great way to start planning for your retirement is plotting out your retirement timeline. So this webinar, the first step is really planning your retirement. So it begins today. So if you've got a piece of paper there, mark it down on the base there. Today's the date. Let's work out where you are today and how close you are to retirement. So as we go through the session, you'll be able to mark out a number of key moments on that timeline, which will all be relevant to your planning journey. Don't worry, I won't ask you to share all your timelines and things that are going on, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'll try and monitor that as we go through. I don't have any colleagues in there today monitoring the chat, so worst case scenario, I'll get them to the end. I'll get to them at the end of today's session. But first question I want to ask you is, does anyone know what the actual retirement age is in Australia. And feel free to throw it in the chat if you want. But does anyone know what the actual retirement age in Australia is? All right. Kate, 67 from Susan as well. It's definitely an important age, 65, another important age in there. So these are really important timeline dates, actually. So they are sort of dates that are in there, but the big one for everyone I always say is it's when you can afford to. So for example, let's have some look at some dates here. So for most people in the community that aren't on like the old school defined benefit schemes, most people's preservation age, so if you're in PSSAP or a normal super fund, is 60. And that just means if you've met a condition of release after 60, for example, you've retired from the workforce, you can access your superannuation funds. Now, the 65 that I saw pop up there, that's actually when you no longer have to meet like a condition of release where you could still be working and get access to your super. That's 65. It's not on this slide, but very important date. It just helps with planning, especially if you're doing things like transitioning to retirement and wanting to draw a little bit of funds out to supplement your income. Maybe you're dialing down some of your work. And then that age 67 is when your people are eligible for the age pension. So really important date that people use that to plan around, because that might be supplementing what they've saved in super to actually retire permanently from the workforce. But I guess the first step in planning is knowing your date and what suits you. I always like to point out that roughly a third of Australians who plan their retirement end up retiring sooner than they'd planned. For some that are lucky enough, this could be due to redundancy at work and those associated benefits with getting a payout, and it brings it forward for them, gives them the opportunity to retire sooner, or maybe just dial back how much work they're doing. So maybe they go away from full time. It could be an issue with their health is something I see quite a lot of. Health events are a big factor in retiring early. But the other one I see a lot now is having to care for elderly parents or a loved one. So, those care commitments or a sick child or something like that. But the really common one I start to see is people having to dial back their work to help their own parents who are far later into retirement than they are. And for those who have been through it and having to help their parents, for example, into aged care, it's quite a confronting and time-consuming event for anyone who's done it. I'm sorry that you've had to go through it. I know how difficult it can be. And I often say with people, we're normally, unfortunately, with aged care, we're looking for the least worst situation rather than, there's no great outcome. But we're looking for the least worst, the most efficient, and where everyone's happy going in there. So just keep these in mind as we go through those dates, because they are factors. I don't like to, start on the negative so early, but it's just something to keep in mind that, a third of Australians actually retire earlier than they had planned, and have to go through that. So just keep that in mind. Look, there's lots of things inside of super on your way up to retirement as well, that is designed around your own health too. I know we talked about redundancy. There are insurances still inside super, like your income protection or total and permanent disability cover. There's, people have rainy day funds as well. So the super fund is there to get you up to retirement, and it does include those insurances. So always just check them, make sure they're up to date. Maybe you're in a much better position with your life and assets now that your insurance is actually you don't need as much insurance. So maybe you can think about dialing that down as well since last time you've reviewed it. But something to think about as you come up to retirement from day one. I'm not going to spend too much time on that stuff, but it's just something I always point out. So we've talked through the key ages. Everyone looks at all those different ages differently. I know I've got my parents and my wife's parents as well look at things very differently. I've seen care with family as well. So It's very different to being an advisor and trying to be objective with your clients and things like that for them. But when it's your own family, it's a much more emotional affair. And so hopefully everyone now is starting to think about a date that they'd like to get to for their retirement. So write down on your timeline just your target retirement age at this point in time. Consider how close you are to that retirement age and sort of how many years it is between now and when that retirement is. And even underneath it, out of 1 to 10 firmness on that date that you've got, just write down there, how firm or flexible am I on this one being, 10's my hard cut, that's my retirement day some people will have it, the actual day of the month of the year. Whereas 1 or 2 might be, this is my guideline. This is what I'm thinking. I know personally, I'm sort of thinking that 62, 63 mark, somewhere like that. I'd like to be able to dial down my work or have the option to do that. I love what I do and I love chatting to people about their retirement. So I'm not in a rush, but who knows, by the time I get there, my view on the world might have changed as well. So get that number down and we'll start to build this picture out a bit for you. I'll just quickly jump back into that chat. Bear with me. Kim, depends on your birthday, but for Super 60, yep, spot on. Excellent. So nothing. Kate, as soon as possible. I love it. Fantastic. All right, so we've got our retirement age down. But it's not just about when you start retirement. Let's also look at how long your retirement could be. And so I always bring up these, I guess, life expectancy tables, and they change a lot. And so they get updated. This one was updated in 2023. I haven't seen anything sort of since then to suggest there's any big changes recently. But essentially, life expectancy is on the rise in Australia. Even though it's sort of in the mid-80s, for those who reach retirement, it's actually more likely you'll live into your late 80s and some of you into your 90s and 100 plus. So we really need to consider your entire retirement. So if you Google life expectancy in Australia, I think from memory comes up about 81, women at 85, and that's just average of lives in Australia. But this data sort of suggests that weighted averages, as you can see, the closer you get to retirement, the higher your average. So more men passed away between 85 and 89 than 80 and 85. And you can see there for women, more women passed away between 90 and 95 than 85, 89. So how long is retirement going to look for you? So some people might look at that and go, I'm not going to make that. Or some people might have a great family history. So some people might go, well, my parents or my grandparents were all late 90s into their hundreds. So maybe you have to actually plan for a much longer retirement. The other part of this is 70% of people retire with a partner. So you have to factor in the chances of between the two of you, one of you living beyond the average actually doubles. So you've got to plan that out. So rather than say maybe a 20-year retirement, is it a 40-year retirement? How much money do we need between the two of us through that retirement period? One of the things I always talk about is, what's your family history like? I'll give you an example. My great-grandfather died early 60s. He was running out of a pub that was burning down and had a heart attack and passed away. Grandfather, heart attack. Both were heavy smokers and tradie drinkers. However, my father has never smoked a day in his life, barely drinks, does Ironman triathlons, but had to have an open heart surgery when he was 65 as well. So regardless of, good behavior, there's obviously an issue with hearts in our family. So that's something I have to factor in there that, is that going to be something for me as I get into my 60s around, getting checked and making sure that I'm okay. And, the male's life expectancy on both sides of my family are generally under 70. So do I want to retire a bit early? And, if I run out, that's okay, but at least I've lived a bit longer. Um, on my wife's side, for example, she has grandparents that lived well into their 90s as well. So maybe she will need more money than me. So how do we plan for that, as an example? Um, Everyone's slightly different. Everyone will have care responsibilities and family responsibilities as well. So it's something to take into consideration when you're looking at these tables, what happens with health and things like that. So just mark down on your piece of paper after looking at that and a little bit of a think. Don't think about it too much, but where do you think around about you'll see your days out? And we'll just mark that down. And I always put an extra 5 years run out age just from funds. You've got to have a little bit of a buffer in there and hope for the best, plan for the worst, hope for the best. And to start to think about your personal circumstances, how your health is, your family history, some of the lifestyle factors. Another factor in there is actually where you live. The closer you are into a capital city, because of the higher access to healthcare and things like that, statistically, you're more likely to live a bit longer. I think it starts to trail off around about 75 k's away from a major centre, are the numbers. Look, I don't have all the understanding on why that is the number, but it is a factor. If you living in a remote community, statistically slightly young, you'll pass away slightly younger. So just keep that in mind when you're writing all these out. And just put that life expectancy in there and a bit of a run out age as well. So now we've got today. We know how long between today and your retirement date, and then we've got a bit of a picture of your life expectancy as well. In my example here, it's nice round numbers, 30 years, and we'll start to talk about that. And I'm a bit selfish in that because I want to talk about some of the chapters that you go through. So life has its ups and downs. Spending habits do actually vary across the course of your life, as well as across the course of your retirement. Your spending in your 20s going out and partying might be different if you have kids in your 30s and 40s and where you're spending money there. It's the same in retirement. We always talk about the three really specific phases and how that works for people. So let's talk about sort of chapter 1 first. It's that newly retired, settling into the new phase of life. This tends to be where the bigger purchases happen, lifestyle purchases. And when I mean that, it's the new cars, it's the boats, it's the caravans, it's the big holiday period, and new hobbies get taken up. And not just golf, it's all those other things, like maybe you join a cycling group or, there's all different kinds of things that you can get into because you've got a bit more time. So that chapter 1 is really all about that sort of go in there. You might have kids with a young family as well. So maybe this is, where you get to spend a bit more time with the grandkids while they're a bit younger. My father's first thing when his first day of retirement was actually to walk over and walk his grandkids to school. That was his first duty when he retired. That's what got him excited for retirement. That was his special thing. So everyone's slightly different on what they choose and what they do. And so this is where you're really active. And so you're spending more on the desirables, and you have a minimum cost on those essentials. So not as much spend on, for example, healthcare and things like that, and doctor's appointments and specialists, because you're out there, you're still fit and active, and you're off and away. Chapter two, this one's starting, this is that midpoint. So you're a bit more settled into retirement. You've got some more structure to your days. You've probably done the big trips, you've done the big purchases. Perhaps you've started to sell some of those big purchases because you're not using them as much anymore. So this is where you start to get a bit more time at home and you spend a bit more on desirables, whether it's, make the house a bit more comfortable. You might get a new TV and renovate some of the house, or, it's you've had 10 or 15 years of all your couches and kitchens and things, and maybe you spend and make your living conditions a bit more luxury for you because you're spending more time at home, more air cons and things like that in the house. We do start to see the essentials start to creep up. You might have a few more health appointments that you need to get to. And remember, these chapters, especially as a couple, you might not hit both of these at the same time. And so chapter three, we typically we see a big shift in that third phase of retirement where we start to see spending on essentials overtake spending on the nice to haves. So your capacity for big overseas adventures or expensive hobbies starts to really wane at this point. And the majority of spending at this point, unfortunately, tends to be on healthcare, and or something like aged care, those kind of things. And like I was saying, you can move through these chapters at different rates. For example, if you have a partner, I had clients that were very much in chapter one and spent the first 2 to 3 years traveling around. They had a van. Craig and Deb, they had a van. They wanted to do a couple of trips, but they also wanted to buy a house on Craig's family farm that was up for sale from the previous owners. So they went back, bought that. They actually did a lot of the renovations themselves. So they're either, renovating this house to retire into or traveling in the van while they had specialists in. Now, they were very much in chapter one. They're out doing big hikes and walks and those kind of ecotourism stuff. Um, but when they come back and they were doing some of the renos, unfortunately, Deb was starting to get dizzy and sick and really unwell. And so went to the doctors, and unfortunately, she had a brain tumor. And all of a sudden, she went from being in that chapter one all the way through to chapter three, and needed surgery and recovery and all those kind of things for her. So Craig was still in chapter one. Deb was still very much had gone to chapter three and had ended up being in there for a couple of years while she recovered. Now, great news about this story is she has recovered and they're back to life and they are traveling again. But it's taken a long time to get from chapter three back to chapter one. And it really put a handbrake on Craig as well, because you're a team, you're a dynamic. And so both of you kind of moved. He went to chapter two and for example, Deb went to chapter three while in recovery, and then is finally back to traveling now. So everyone will be different in what happens to them. I feel like I'm just giving examples of worst case scenarios, but yeah, it does happen. So just keep in mind that when you're sort of planning out your chapters. So I always like to say, if there's stuff you have planned for retirement and you can actually get it in before you retire, maybe take some long service leave or something like that, just do it. Get in there, have a trip, go for it. Why wait? And then on your timeline, start to think about your capacity to do things throughout that sort of timeline for you. So, all right, if I've got the big European holiday, whereabouts do I put that on my actual timeline? Because, there's a lot of walking, or there might be, I'm in Europe and there's lots of stairs and not great ways to get around, or whatever it is. Do I bump that up to earlier and then look at more local Australian holidays a bit later in life, when there's less stress on my body and things like that? Is that an option for you? Is that something you've got there? All right, let's start to get some things on your wish list. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff that you should be excited for. I think the big thing is having a few targets for when you retire. And that way we can start to budget, because we'll start to look at two things. How much income do you need throughout retirement? But there's also those big ticket items that you want to actually think about as well. So how much of a lump sum out of your super perhaps do you need to take out to pay for these things? So start to think about this. Most people just think about retirement as not working, whereas some might think about it as, you know, what's the opportunity to do things I just haven't had the time or freedom to do. Maybe I can only take 2 weeks off work at a time, so I just don't have that space. Every day is a Saturday, hopefully for you. Just don't go to the shops on a Saturday and crowd the place out. Let the young families get through there. But take a moment to close your eyes and sort of picture what your retirement looks like for you. You know, where are you? Are you going to be in the same house that you're in, or same town? Who are you with? Who's important that you stay close by? Do you have a group of friends that you want to spend more time with? Is it family? What makes you happy in yourself in retirement? Think about what you're doing. Maybe just write down on your piece of paper sort of 1, 2, 3 word answers to the question of what is on your retirement wish list. I've seen people say, do you know what, Andrew? I'm going dragon boat racing. I'm going to travel around Australia and do some of that. For a lot of people, they have either the big European holiday, maybe the big Canadian holiday, things like that. Grab the van, they're going traveling. Or maybe they just want to spend some time with family or sit on the couch and do nothing for a little while as well. Everyone's slightly different. Some people will want to play different sports, golf, all those kind of things as well. Or get into, I know people have got into flower making in retirement and stuff like that as well. So that's how they want to spend their days, or doing art, those kind of things. It's all about you. It's your time. Write all this stuff down on a piece of paper. Maybe flip the page from your timeline and just write it down on there. And once you start to have those things, we can really start to put on your wish list. So we've got the name now. All right, what and where is this going to be? When? Which part of the time horizon on there? How much is that going to actually cost me? So is it an ongoing expense like a membership or something like that? No, I don't have much time until July for the European holiday. I was just looking at flights before for for work somewhere. I don't think you'll be getting away with $15,000 for a European holiday at the moment, with all prices where they are. For some people, it's, their house is paid off. So that's the big factor. As soon as I retire, I have no debt. That's the last thing I have to do. For them, that's their view of freedom. I'm free from debt. I never have to service that mortgage again. For some people, they just want a big screen TV to watch the footy on and have their mates over and those kind of things as well. So it's okay. Everyone should be different. Some are beach people, some are mountains people. Everyone's different. So get stuck into your lists. So here's some sort of ideas for you. I've just put them on the screen. Hopefully they jog some creative ideas for you. We've now got our sort of wish list, right? So we're starting to personalize this for you. So, we've got timeline for, all right, we're going to try and get our house paid off before retirement. I'm retiring at 60. I want that European holiday, day 1, week 1, I'm flying out to Europe. That's what I'm going to do. How long am I going to be over there? Is it just a month? And get a bit of a refresh in myself. What are all the other stuff in there? So these are the big ticket items that I've just put up there now. And they're sort of your lump sum amounts. How much am I going to pull out of super, or how much do I need in savings to put aside for that? And hopefully you've started to jot out, okay, I'm thinking about it at this date. It's probably going to cost X amount. All right, how do I start to look at that? Because then once we know what you want to do, then we can plan about how to build your super to get it right for your retirement. Or maybe you already have enough and you can retire a bit earlier than you thought. But there's also some other things in there that I actually want to talk about as well. So things like hobbies, Family commitments, everyone's different with family commitments. Do you have to travel? Do your family live close? You know, are you going to have to travel a bit more? Those kind of things. Um, am I just going to be a golf member and pay, oh, it's probably 10 grand a year now for golf memberships. Everything seems to be going up, especially if it's got the word royal in front of it. Um, you know, am I going to have to travel to see family? My family is in Ballarat, so I have to go and see them quite regularly. My wife's the same in Victoria. Do we have to go and travel to see them? You know, are we allowing for space for them to come up? Do we need an extra room in our residence? Are we going to sell where we're at? Do we need to consider visitors and things like that? So just some of the questions that you should be asking yourself around that. So now we've got all this list down. That wish list, I want you to prioritize. So, you know, is paying off the house number one? Is that European holiday? Is that number two, must do, have to? Or is it sort of, you know, am I okay with 3 weeks instead of 4 weeks? Those kind of things. Start to put on your priority list where you're at. Like the retirement age, my 62, 63 retirement age, priority on that is probably actually pretty low. I'm sort of at that 2 or 3 out of 10, for example, on am I that keen on retiring? Do I still want to do a bit of work? Those kind of things. You know, priority, my life expectancy priority, I'd probably put that pretty low. I'd like to live a bit longer if I can. Those kind of things, play around with them on your priority list now and start to mark it out. Now, how much are you going to actually need in retirement? It's a hard one to calculate. And I normally mention the word budget, and I think I see people shrink into their chair. So what I want to do is give you a couple of ways to just do almost like a reverse budget, or use some different tools that are available to you to make it super easy rather than running a spreadsheet. One of my colleagues, I know he runs a spreadsheet for everyday expenses on everything he does in and out, and jumps into his bank accounts and looks at his credit card statement and downloads the CSV file and compares that month to previous months and over underspends. And personally, I couldn't think of anything worse. It's bad enough logging into my bank accounts and seeing how much I've spent in the little pie graph that they give you. So everyone's different, but I'll give you a couple of sort of hints and tips about how much you're spending at the moment. This is a really good one. So even just writing out something like this and sort of saying what the categories are, feel free to take a photo of this. I think we will send around the video recording of this afterwards as well. But you know, start to write down what you're spending now versus say what you think it'll be in retirement. Then all of a sudden you can start to go, oh, that's I'm either going to spend a bit more in retirement, a bit less. You know, insurance is 75% replacement income. The reason they use that is because that's what most people can live off, or it was worked out to be done in the sort of 70s and 80s. But let's have a bit of a look. So housing, for example, you know, if you're paying off your mortgage, you've got a mortgage up to retirement, then you're paying it off. All of a sudden, do I need that extra money in my bank account because my mortgage is completely paid off? All of a sudden, my cash flows really ramped up. So the next one there, maybe electricity and gas is going to go up because essentially you're at home more. So do you actually you know, have the aircon on more? Will you be cooking at home more, for example, if you've got gas, those kind of things? If you're in some of the southern states, well, you might need heating more rather than cooling. So consider that as a thing. Do you have solar on the roof? Is that the plan? Maybe you get solar on the roof as you retire. Maybe put that down as a lump sum so that you're reducing your overhead costs throughout retirement. Yes, it's an upfront burden, but are you saving money as energy costs increase? What about food? I know when I was working in the CBD, you know, you'd go out for a coffee in the morning. Would you go out for lunch with your co-workers and things like that? Because, you know, it's that social aspect. Are you going to spend as much out every week? I know that my food bill when I work in an office is far higher than, say, $50 a week. And I'd definitely say that I'd save more than that when I work from home. So that's a big factor in there. What else have we got? Phone and internet. This is a really interesting one. Most people don't have a huge change. Um, I'll show you another reference just after this, but the average retiree spends about $40 a month on subscription services like Netflix and those kind of things. So do you do the same? Do you have one and then rotate it out each month to another one so that you maybe only spending, $15 or $20 rather than the 40, those kind of things. I can never keep up with our household, which subscriptions we've got, and whether or not we're sharing it with people or how that works. So that's a big factor in there every month coming out. Household items, are you going to be spending more on the shopping list because you're not eating out as much, you're cooking at home? Maybe. Are you buying things for the house because it just makes it more comfortable? Those kind of things. Clothing, I probably don't spend $500 a year on clothing as it is. I'm happy to keep wearing the same stuff. So maybe everyone's different, do you need the office attire, and are you spending as much on those goods and outfits for the office if you have to wear suits every day and things like that? Transport's an interesting one. A lot of people find that maybe in retirement, maybe in that first phase, they still need, say, 2 cars, but they get into phase 2 or 3 and they only need 1 car between them as a couple. Or, are you driving around as much? Can you take public transport? In Queensland, we've got the 50-cent fares. Is that an option where you live versus, spending so much on transport? This will obviously fluctuate, as we're sort of seeing with fuel prices at the moment. And then the other one there, health and spending. Look, as I've put 5,000 in there extra a year, but really it'll depend on where you are in your retirement and how your health is. Everyone will be slightly different. Do you have the top healthcare cover, or are you happy to be on the public system? Are you eligible for seniors healthcare card and things like that? That's a factor in there on your spending on health. Regular savings, look, I mean, do you need the regular savings if you've got your superannuation accessible there? Does it just all sit in there and stay invested, or however you want to have it in there? That's a factor. And then the last one, I've just put in leisure activities. Look, I think people will be surprised. This is where a lot of money gets spent, going out and spending time, doing activities more because you've got the time to go out there and enjoy it. Now, this is just one way of sort of jotting down all the different options that you have. But what I want to do as well is actually show you another website that will help, hopefully. Just bear with me while I flick between screens. And it is AFSA Retirement Standard. If you just Google AFSA Retirement Standard, it's the first one that comes up for most people. And this group actually goes around and they survey retired people and couples about how much they're actually spending a year in retirement at the moment. And they do a quarterly update. So we've got the December 25 quarter. So they must be due for a new one soon. That'll be interesting with what's going on. But generally what they actually talk about, this is a good one there, but generally what they talk about, a comfortable retirement for a couple is about $75,000 to $78,000 a year in the pocket retirement needs. Now, 54 for a single, and as proportionately, it is more expensive as a single to retire. But it does give you a breakdown on what they actually are spending money on and how that works. As a guide, it gives you the age pension amount over here, including supplements. So it really shows how much of a difference it is between, how much of a comfortable lifestyle costs versus what people are actually getting on aged care. Now, you can actually download the full detailed expenditure. And that I always like to highlight these streaming services. So these are all weekly amounts. So just be aware that these are all things. I'm not sure who's spending too much money, I guess, on DVDs anymore, but maybe, but chemist expenses, all the out-of-pocket stuff, takeaway food and snacks. What you can do, print this out and actually write down next to it what you're spending every week on it next to it. And then you can do sort of a bit of a plus or minus. And actually, when you come to the bottom here, total weekly expenditures about this for a couple, for example, maybe you're a bit above, maybe you're a bit below, and you can actually start to play around with, okay, where are we spending money? Can I save some money somewhere? Or am I spending more on different things than other people, for example? Just something to think about. Where are we? So yeah, I mean, comfortable lifestyle as a single, what's that, about $80 a haircut every month sort of thing. So maybe that's where you start to save money. Other people will say that's the last thing they'll cut. So yeah, everyone's slightly different on that one. I'll just stop there for some questions. If anyone's got questions, please feel free to fire them through. No, looks all good. I will come back. We're getting there. We're nearly through most of the presentation. We've got a few slides left. But really, this should now really start to structure or have an idea in your head of what you want in retirement. And that's what it's all about. The whole idea of this first presentation from us is really about understanding what you want in retirement, and understanding your time horizon and your expenses. From here, that's when we can start to do the maths on, you know, is that appropriate? Can you spend that much money? How do we look at it? We'll show you some modeling tools in the next section, ways to grow your super before retirement as well, tax effective strategies that you could use, for example, other things like getting extra money into super at certain times, and just the modeling as well around it. So that's stage 2. That's called maximizing for retirement. And so that will come up soon. So we'll have the recording of this. You can rewatch this beforehand if you want. And then we'll also have that next one, maximizing. So you can join along and go, all right, I've got all my numbers now. How does this fit in my super? Am I on track? Where am I looking? How do I increase? Can I retire early if I've got already enough for what I want to do? And that's where we go to for our next session. So next steps for you is book in for that maximizing for retirement presentation. Hopefully I get you again, and we get to go into it a bit more. Are you thinking about retirement? Are you already comfortable with all those things and your numbers? Are you starting to think about your daily expenditure, your lump sums a bit more, and managing your retirement more actively? Like, are you starting to shape things now and thinking about, oh, will I do that in retirement? Is this something I'm only doing because I'm working, or because of a certain situation? So hopefully this triggers some light bulb moments through the week for you that you go, oh, this will be interesting as I come into retirement. If you want a bit more of a hand with your planning part of retirement and marking things out, we actually have, for our PSSAP members, our super specialists. Now you can book in with that team, and actually they will sit down with you and go through into more planning for retirement. But what I'll do now is I'll jump back into that chat, and if anyone's got any questions around the planning side of retirement, please fire away into the questions and I'll stick around. If you've got everything you needed out of today, thank you so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you at Maximizing for Retirement, and please feel free to enjoy your afternoon, and hopefully have a better idea on where you're going with retirement. No worries, everyone. No worries, Susan. Look forward to it.